it show, it stays on because of you fools. We've been dancing with the devil way too long. I know it's gone, but get ready to pay your dues. Oh God, come back home. This crazy world is filled with lies and abusers. We need you now before we're too far gone. I hope one day they finally see the truth. God, we need you now.
I know the truth is hard to swallow, just digest it. Suspected something's going on. Chosen, just neglected. Deflected by some breaking news. How we just accepted. Expected just to fall in line and follow their perspective. Don't question their objectives, but I got a lot of questions. How these kids molested, but nobody's been arrested. Read it in the Testament. These children are protected. So I'm fighting all these terrorists, both foreign and domestic.
Hey, folks, welcome to Truth Talk with Steve. Today I've got a guest that I'm just very excited to talk to. He's got life experience that is really hard for most of us who aren't exposed to the darkness in a way that he has been. And it's just, I have tremendous respect for this gentleman, for what he's been through and where he's at in his life, and his, the strength that he's got, and, the courage to come out and speak about the things that he's experienced and been involved in. So I want to welcome today Nathan Reynolds. How you doing, Nathan?
Absolutely marvelous. How are you doing today, Steve?
Hey, man, I'm doing so good. I can barely stand it.
Good.
Well, man, I just really appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy guy and you're doing a lot of great work. And so thanks for, setting a little time aside today for me and my audience. And, I'd love to, have you basically just start from the beginning. Like, what was your childhood like, and the family dynamics, and, just kind of go through your story. You've got a beautiful story about falling in love, and then some, crazy things that took place as your memory started to come back. And it's really fascinating, and it's truly incredible, and it's inspiring as heck. So, I'm just grateful to have you here today.
Steve, thank you so much for giving an opportunity for me to be here. I think there is an absolute unbelievable amount of people who woke up today with a massive fuzzy database for what their past really was and what really took place in their life, and they're left with a cloud of confusion. And that's really where I found myself for so many years of my life, so lost and so shattered in the most intimate part of my identity about who I was and why I was here and what purpose I had. Like, I felt like I was a ruined piece of trash for so long that I had nothing left to give this world. I had nothing left inside me except for despair and this darkness. And it just consumed me for so many years of my life. But as you shared, there was a turning point that took place, over the course of finding a woman that loved me and began to show me what unconditional love was. And as I began to get to know her, we began to see this disparity between what my childhood was like and what hers was like. She was raised up in a normal middle-income Christian household, and she shared with me what her family reunions were like and growing up with her family members. And as she started sharing this with me, it began to make me realize how utterly distinct and different our lives were. And as I share with her more of mine, I saw this look of horror on her face. I saw this look of disgust, because what I had grown to be normal had been so perverted, so corrupted. I came from this family down in Arizona where my family, the Reynolds family, settled down and started an empire. And for those of you that are unfamiliar, there is a few different branches of the Reynolds family. The one I come from really traffics in secrecy, blackmail. They maneuver people through business dealings and through control levers that are very, very dark, that are very insidious. And they found that access to power was most advantageous for them if they were willing to generationally pass on one of their children out of each generation into this horrible cult. And there's no other way to say it. This cult operated, they really are this brotherhood of the snake. And outside of Lake Havasu City, Arizona, my grandfather, he operated as he's a Fourth Order Knights of Columbus. And these people intimately connected with the Jesuits have been practicing this old religion for a long time. And really what it has to do about is the systemic, intentional, strategic abuse of children at very early ages to shatter their identity, to cause them to split apart internally in order to survive, to utilize something that's called dissociation, to fracture their mind. And it's a very willful, very scientific methodology that's being used. And it has been used by a lot more of these upper class families, these ruling families, for a long time, so that they could control someone, because it's all about capturing the will. It was all about capturing your willingness to go along with this agenda. People are looking around today wondering how people are willing to do such diabolically evil things towards other people and feel no remorse, or seemingly feel no remorse. But it's because for many of them, their life, their understanding of what life and love is so shattered early on that their ability to survive is predicated on the fact of becoming a psychopath, a sociopath, somebody who does not feel relational normative experiences. And so my grandfather, he systemically abused me physically, sexually, emotionally, along with other men in this cult who had their grandchildren that came into it. For those of you that are unfamiliar with Arizona, Lake Havasu City sits on the border of California and Arizona, and it's really in the desert. It's one of the hottest cities in the entire world. And in 1960s, a guy named Robert P. McCulloch purchased that land and developed it so that he could build out a community for retirees, but specifically to be able to have a sovereign legal territory. A guy named C.V. Wood, who is the designer architect of Disneyland and many other of these little pleasure islands and pleasure towns across the country, was brought in to help to build out a community that would facilitate this. So they brought and purchased the London Bridge, the actual bridge that crossed the River Thames in London. They dropped it over this river in this lake called Lake Havasu, and they created a legal sovereign territory for the city of London. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the city of London, it is the financial empire of the world. It truly is. From there, you have the religious order of the Vatican that runs out of another sovereign city-state, Vatican City, which is not part of Italy. Same with the District of Columbia, which is not technically part of the United States. This is where mostly the militant arm of the world runs out of. And so this
Havasu is set up similar?
It's absolutely set up that way.
No
It's
kidding.
legally,
I
it's
had
deeded.
never caught that. Wow.
It is deeded over to the city of London and
Incredible.
leased for the price of what is called a cochina doll. For those of you that are unfamiliar, a cochina doll is literally the long-term lease in perpetuity that they have to this land, to the city of London. And that what is held in there is a cochina, which is basically what you and I would equate to a fallen angel. The cochina in the Hopi ideology come down in this area in northern Arizona, the San Francisco Peaks during the winter, and between the winter solstice and the summer solstice, families bring their children up to the high places in the mountains so that these beings can mate with them. And then they carve out of cottonwood roots, these idols, these images of these angels, these deities that came down out of heaven and inseminate themselves into this bloodline. And so my family practiced the same during the summer months. They would go down to the desert places. During the winter months, they'd go up to the high peaks. This is where a lot of cults operate based off of the winter and the summer solstice. That's literally the day we're recording this right now. You know, and This is a serious religion that these people operate, and they raise their children up. They literally breed families for these purposes, and they offer up their children through the fires of Moloch, like you read about in the scriptures. You hear about this for antiquity. This has been the divine right of kings to do for generations, and a way of making sure somebody is completely locked in step with the system. And in the city of London, that bridge, even when they were bringing it over, they found 80 bodies entombed in the walls of it, and 5 of which were children. This is in their mainstream historical accounts of it. This is because they practice what's called inurement inside the walls. I would be taken down there by my family members, and inside the cavities of that, horrific amounts of abuse would take place. Very dark rituals that are designed to summon up these spirits, to commune with these people and give them divination or foretelling. They really believe these things will tell them the future. And I know for some people that is so far beyond their realm of understanding. But listen, there is a false prophecy that goes out. There is a true anointing to tell the future. This is similar to the spirit of Python and the spirit, these snake spirits, like the gospel in the apostles, they're dealing with and contending with in the book of Acts. When they cast that out, all the people were in an uproar because she used to tell the future. And these serpents literally give people downloads about the future. So if you're somebody who wants to make money, who wants to have power, who wants to have control, if you could tell what the next best thing was going to be, if somebody could have told you about what mobile phones were going to be, if somebody could have told you what were the materials that were going to be utilized in the future, and you could invest in those early on, that's literally insider trading of the greatest kind. So the price to do that is the systemic abuse of these children, is the sacrifice and the consumption of life, which is blood. And that is really what takes place inside the walls of the city of London, amongst other buildings and houses like the Our Lady of the Lake Catholic Church there. The rituals are done inside the literal halls of that building, and in order to kind of desecrate it, to defile it, and to follow in practice. But this is something that's been practiced by the Roman Catholic Church and its various forms of the brotherhood within it for many generations. I just happened to be raised inside it, and it truly shattered my identity. And it taught me a lot about spiritual warfare, physical warfare. It taught me a very perverse side of reality. But on the other side, it gave me the ability to have insight into how the enemy operates now in my life and be able to try to bring that to light to so many others, because what these people do in darkness truly has to be shouted from the rooftops.
I totally agree. And yeah, it's like you say, it's been hidden so well, but yet so much of it's in plain sight in many ways. And once you become aware of it, like they say, the symbology, you start to see things and start to pay attention. It's amazing how much is truly going on damn near in every city in the country, it seems, throughout the world, probably even.
Absolutely. It's the satanic system that has truly infested the world. And this happens when men and women shirk their responsibilities. They abdicate the right to resist, and they give up and they give in and go along with the easier way. There really is a broad way that leads to destruction. There's a hard path that requires a lot of suffering, a lot of persecution, and a lot of willingness to do things the hard way. But you know what? It's one that leads to satisfaction. It leads to life. And ultimately, that's the one that I was on, because as much as I was consumed with the desire to die. I thought the whole world was like this. My whole worldview was shaped through that type of horror show. I thought pedophilia was normal. I thought that's what family reunions were. That's what Thanksgiving was. That's what Christmas was. That's what you should expect to have when you go on summer vacation at grandpa's. And so because of that, it made me think, there is no way out of this. I learned helplessness so deeply. And there's so many today that are trapped inside that system, like you talked about, coming out of the Mormon church. However many of these cults operate, it's to slowly work them in like an onion to these layers of belief and convictions until you're so deeply rooted that there's a core loss of your own personal identity, and there's an adaptation of only the identity of the group, the hive, the coven, the church, and you can't see outside of it. You literally cannot imagine your life outside of it. And that's how deeply impregnated I was with these ideologies in my head, to where I could not imagine escaping. And so they began to formulate in me a way of getting out, a way of fighting back. And truly, that's where violence became this intimate relationship with me, where violence and seeking and learning how to hunt down people and begin to kill people I believed were pedophiles, or they made me believe were pedophiles, and begin to systemically hunt the souls of men. And that is where so much of my identity got caught up. And later we ended up moving to the White Mountains, which is where deeply founded by the Mormon church, and where some of those trafficking began to take place, or these body products that are produced during these rituals, during these, butcheries, are marketed out like a pharmaceutical line,
Terrific.
like a
I think that's
pharmaceutical
one thing that
product.
people don't really understand. Even, they hear of pedophilia, and maybe they've heard of, the young children and abuse, but the sacrifice is mind-boggling to them, the murders, the organ harvesting and selling of the organs, and how just so much money, you know, is made through all those things. And the trafficking is just, it's hard for, like you say, when you've grown up a certain way and you have certain life experience, that just seems so outrageous to you that it's so hard that you just think the person's crazy that's talking about it. But as you open your mind up and are willing, even though it's dark and not fun, you know, the reason I wanted to go down the path is because I'm just looking for truth. That's it.
Mhm.
Like, it's not always going to be pretty, but I'm tired of living the way I've been conditioned to live. And I want to learn, I think it's so important. I think this awakening that's taking place, my take on it is it's awakening to who we truly are as a soul. And I think we're in a war for our soul. And that's what, the evil side is is really all about, it seems. And I mean, correct me and if I'm wrong, because like I said, I'm here to learn from you as well as those listening.
You're spot on. It's a love of the truth that is the thing that sets people free at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Those that don't have a love for the truth, they cannot hold any of this. They truly can't. Because if it's so far outside your paradigm that you've never had a hook in your jaw moment that wrenched you out of the normal world, and you saw behind the veil that there is some radical evil that puts on skin suits and walks around and
literally
utilizes people like dogs. Like we treat dogs better than we treat people who come out and talk about abuse. You can put up a humane society ad of dogs being tortured and abused or pit fighting, but if you have children come forward and start talking about the same thing, people censor it. Like, you want to talk about the perversion of what it's like to try to come forward and talk about these things. There's a natural aversion. I understand. It's good that people are averse to this. However, you must also know that that allows perpetrators camouflage to continue to apply this grooming behaviors, to continue to apply their secrecy and keep this type of mechanism fed. Because the truth is, this is the fabric of what has built up so many people's kingdoms and what has built up compromise. So the intimate aspect of what I had to go through early on, it's like there is no product that's wasted. If you think about the same way a company doesn't allow any aspect of when a chicken comes in through the factory line, no product of that animal is wasted. Every bit of it is going to be sold, like every bit of it. And human beings that are pushed into these systems, they are literally going to be utilized at every aspect of it has a price to be put on it. So instead of just making me go through physical or sexual abuse when I was a child in order to shatter my mind and create a separate identity that was filmed so that they could then blackmail the person that was doing the abuse so that they could secure their placement as a yes man for the rest of their life, for the rest of their career, whatever arena. A lot of these people were nobodies. Please understand. They weren't all. It was not eyes wide shut almost ever. Let me put it that way, okay? It wasn't glamorous. It was almost never pretty sexy people. It was almost always very ordinary people that pass for nobodies every day of the week, and that's their camouflage. It was middle Americans in by and far. And you know what? It was men acting out these lusts and these spirits that were empowering them to do these things. And it was just perversion at every bracket of it. And truly, human organ harvesting is so detestable to even consider, but this is reality. You guys, you must understand the quest for immortality, the quest to live longer, extend your life becomes insatiable. When you reach a certain level of threshold of money, of finances, of wealth, you think very differently than what most of us who go through what it's like to struggle between paycheck to paycheck, or try to think about the burdens of debt and house bills and mortgages and how do I pay for college, and all of those stressors of life that most of us experience eat up mental resources that change drastically when wealth becomes never a thought ever again in your mind. And you suddenly, it pivots to how long can I extend my life and what am I willing to get in order to do that. And that's where so many of these products come from. People are willing to take this techno sorcery, like it talks about, this pharmakia, and they take blood for even as a basic level, public information. 80% of all the blood that gets donated here, when you go to a humane drive, you go to the Red Cross as a blood drive, 80% of that is used in pharmaceutical products. People are eating the flesh and the blood of people on a regular basis, not knowing, not caring to know, but they are literally consuming the life of other people to extend their own. That's vampirism. And these people that operate inside these cults, it's not always drinking blood out of skulls. Sometimes it is, but more often than not, it's these products that they're getting out of there. And that is what is fueling so much of these people's ability to outwork us, to outlabor us, outmaneuver us, outthink us. It feeds that system. And so much of why I'm out here is trying to shake them awake, because you must look at the evil. We have a duty. If you want to be somebody like yourself, you're saying you're a lover of the truth, then you have a duty to look at truth wherever it is. And you know what? There is an entire population that needs to hear the gospel. They need to hear there's deliverance, salvation, rescue that is available to them, that they can find healing and restoration, and that we need justice to flow into these areas to ransom people. We need to
Yep.
buy them out of their bondage, and I absolutely believe it can happen because I'm a living witness of that. I have now met hundreds of other people over the last just 6 months. I've done almost 100 interviews. And you know what? I've been able to meet and get to connect with people from all over the world. This is not just an American thing. This isn't just
Yeah.
something that takes place here. This is saturated, like you said, many areas of the world. And it especially took a launch wherever the Nazis and their Operation Paperclip and a lot of their scientists took the secret papers from all of their human experimentations on mind control out of Germany. And wherever that went, you see within a generation, all of these people presenting with multiple personality disorder, all these people coming forward into our psych wards and into our jails and prison systems and infecting all of this generationally starts carrying on. And so I'm third and fourth, I'm many generations into this. My family members have been practicing this old religion for a long time, but now we have millions of people who came into this through scientific methods, and it is burgeoning abundantly everywhere. And as long as it stays in the darkness, it's going to multiply.
Absolutely. That when you were talking about pharmakeia and the things to stay younger, you know, I have beliefs about certain things that I have very strong opinions on regarding LDS leadership, etc., and what they're truly involved in and who they truly worship. It's not the Christ that I know, you know, and um, I just and so as I have listened and learned some of the things that I believe now to be true, and as I try to connect dots to make sense of certain things or to add, I guess, more credibility to a belief, as I look at those brethren, for example, and how old most of them lived compared to the average, and the way they look at the ages, it just makes me think logically, yeah, they're doing something with some of those things that I know do those things, whether it's adrenochrome or whatever. Is that safe to assume?
Well, I can testify to what I saw specifically. These vials during the course of these traumatizing events, like they literally strap you down and put
Yeah.
IVs in you and make you. It's not always that sometimes you're being physically abused. Sometimes it's just they're going to put audio on of horrible things and video on in front of you. And it changes generationally. And during the course of that, they literally drain out blood from you as you're experiencing these different emotions. Sometimes it's joyful emotion. Sometimes it's elated emotion. Sometimes it's something that comes called oxytocin, which gets dumped into the bloodstream. That's like a love drug, which makes you feel very different. That's sometimes something that's being sought. So there's a whole
So
other industry with
there's different brands of
there's
quote
literally
adrenochrome.
different. There's
Maybe that's not
different
the right
types of
word.
products.
Interesting. I hadn't actually heard that before.
That's why breastfeeding mothers are a key component that are brought into this, because there's no stronger amount of oxytocin than when a woman's breastfeeding. This is why they utilize breast milk and all these bodily fluids during these rituals, because they contained these various different compounds. Well, now we have a pharmaceutical approach to it where people are put down, and just like at a blood bank, they're drained off, not entirely, but they might take a unit of blood off of somebody, and then they start this extraction process to synthesize out the various different components that are within there. And they would literally come out with these vials after that production was done in Lake Havasu City. This was a factory that did this. They trafficked people from southern states like in Arizona and through the border, and they brought them up into Tucson, into Phoenix, and then over into Lake Havasu. And then many of these products were generated there. And these little vials were often in silver, copper, or gold little vials that they would carry around. And that's what the children, like myself, I physically had to carry these vials around in a backpack. Children are ideal mules because nobody suspects them of doing anything. So they make great assassins because nobody thinks about them as a danger or as a threat, especially if they're a white child and looks well dressed and is well articulate. They're the easiest to camouflage. And so literally from Lake Havasu, we would bring those products up to Pinetop Show Low Lakeside. And there at the Mormon Temple, they would be taken to be consumed by the LDS leadership during parts of their rites and rituals. Very Freemasonic, very Luciferian. Many of their rites and rituals are, including the consumption of these substances. Now, I truly believe many of the people who are participants in these things have no idea. They don't have a clue what they're doing. They're drinking wine from a simulated skull, and that's all they think that's taking place there. They have no idea what the vast majority of it is. They don't understand why they have that lucid effect. But others, absolutely, that are deeper in that cult oven, that onion, they're the ones who are absolutely cognizant of what's taking place.
Are you tired of paying exorbitant monthly fees for your in-home entertainment? Do you wish there was a way to bring quality and affordable entertainment right into your household without a monthly subscription? Well, look no further. Introducing the VC Box Android TV Stream Box. Since 2020, VC Box has been enriching people's lives all over the world, and now it's coming to North America. Say goodbye to scattered subscriptions and countless apps. We've got all your streaming in one place. This is the best fully loaded Android TV box provider in North America. Our user-friendly interface makes navigation a breeze, and with the voice remote featuring Google Assistant, finding your entertainment has never been easier. The VC Box V2 Pro Android box is the epitome of convenience. Sit back, relax, and enjoy your favorite shows and movies with just a few simple voice commands. And the best part, no monthly subscriptions. That's right, you heard it correctly. Say goodbye to those pesky recurring fees and hello to endless entertainment. Join the VC Box revolution and elevate your entertainment experience. Don't miss out on this amazing opportunity. Visit our website and order your VC Box now. Bring home the VC Box today and bring endless joy and excitement to your household. VC Box, unleash the power of entertainment.
Wow, it's crazy. And like you say, blackmail, that's the weapon that has really allowed them to corrupt all the way from the top of governments, down to city governments, to where, we're dealing with today, knowing that, whether it's the government, the DOJ, you name it, they're all corrupt. And that's why we have such a hard time getting any justice out of the justice system we have. And, these people control everything. And so that's why you don't find any accountability. And that's what frustrates so many of us. But I have a feeling their days are coming. At least I hope so. Well, let's shift gears a little bit and talk, about, what was it that made you kind of start to see that there was something different and that wasn't the norm? And then how were you able to get yourself free from it without, and I shouldn't say without, with whatever backlash, and to be able to get free and then to get to the level where you can actually speak about it, and feel like you're safe. I mean, I think, if you got God on your side, you're probably pretty safe, but these people are wicked as hell, and they'll do anything to get you if they want to shut you up, it seems like.
You got that right. They have many different methods with which to instill that fear in us, but at the end of the day, you have to make a decision. And that's the crux of what my book was about, was making that decision. Do you leave it all behind in that horrible place of pain? Because half of your soul is what bears this trauma and this scar, and you're just trapped. I was so trapped in despair for so many years of my life early on, especially my teenage years. I was getting manipulated by you lose your ability to believe anybody. First of all, you become so convinced that everybody has an ulterior agenda that you can't trust them fundamentally. You don't know if this new friend that you have in your life is just somebody else that's a part of this, who's looking for information to see whether or not you're a part of it, and they're going to manipulate that and then crush you and punish you for it later on. So I was just so stuck with this. And, the way out that I had then was violence. I thought you could kill these people off. That was it. I thought that was the way that you deal with this the most effectively. And you know what? In one way, it is very effective. It's very final. The average pedophile is going to offend on 80 to 100 children before he's caught, if he is caught. And this is reality. This is not some kind of fictitious statement. This is reality. These people consume so many, like a guy named Rex King. If you want to study Alfred Kinsey, this is a great book for any of you that are actually wanting to dive into this more. It's called The Eaters of Children, The Pedocracy Exposed. This is written by Johnny Cerrucci. It says how access to power is granted through the rape, torture, and ritualistic slaughter of the innocent. And he has a whole section in here about Rex King. And Alfred Kinsey was a guy who, to this day, they utilize his studies on sex, including much of it on children infants all the way down from birth on. And he paired up with pedophiles to get them to do these experiments on children to document this. And this is, to this day, if you go to court because somebody in your family has been raped by somebody else, by a pedophile, they use the same information to deliberate on how they're going to determine how much effect it had on the child. This is how they'll determine sentencing. Okay. This is literally comes from people like Rex King, a guy who documented 800 different victims that he abused. And those are still like this University of Indiana has those documents in their archives, and they do not give them to the FBI. The FBI tried to sequester them. They're like, no, thank you. Like, this is where, like, this is insidiously sown itself into the places of our universities, our government, our legal system, our justice system. That's because there is an entirely different beast system that's running the show, and it's through these areas of compromise. And so, like, I thought, you have to kill these people off. You can't, there's no other way around it. And so even when I was a junior in high school at 17 years old, I got emancipated to the United States government. They have this thing called the delayed entry program where you can go in early. And man, I thought I had my ticket to freedom. I thought I had my ticket to being a hero. You know, at the end of the day, I wanted to die a glorious death. I wanted to die saving another soldier's life. I wanted away from the cult. And I thought, they will give me a team of people to go hunt these guys down. And it's called special kill teams in the United States military. And they have spies within spies all over the military. There's units, soldiers drop in and out of units all the time. And this is how they do espionage and counter espionage. And that was like my world. And I was like so hungry for it. And all of my identity, all of like my hope and purpose was in this like outlet that I was going to finally get freedom there, you know? And as I got into the military, I learned that there was not this same religious cult, but there was a similar manipulative, scientific kingdom of compromise ripe through the military. There was human trafficking taking place just as abundantly and prolifically. There was just as much horrific intentional abuse of children that was taking place, but in a different kind of method where there wasn't
a lot of experiments going on too with.
Yes. You know, and a lot of genetic experiments and a lot of augmentation experiments. There's a lot of super soldier programs where you can volunteer. And I signed up for everything I could get my hands on. I wanted to be a warrior, the greatest warrior that you could be, you know, but at the end of it, I began to see that these people are just as compromised. They're just as corrupt, and it just killed my idol fundamentally. And I was left, you know, I got into a altercation of a sense with a general down at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, and it was over. Like, all of this team that I'd worked in, everything that I'd ever hoped for was gone. And I was washed out of the military. I got an honorable medical discharge and was shattered, because that was everything for me, you know. And I ended up going to the University of Colorado at Boulder, studying psychology and trying to pick myself up and try to help others, you know, and just try to survive, because at that point I was like untouchable to a lot of these cults. They didn't want anything to do with me. I was an asset out of containment, is what you'd call it. I was not following orders, and I was very loose. And at the same time, I went off all the medications, because that's generally the main goal of the United States military. When you've got war fighters that are trained to do all types of clandestine operations, they kill them off. You know, they suicide them off through drugs and then through removing the drugs. And I went through hell for the first year after trying to get out of that place. And I started going to a recovery program, like a 12-step recovery program. And I've started really getting sanity back in my life. I went off all pharmaceuticals, because at the end of the day, I mean, I was a walking wreck. My hair was falling out. My heart was beating out of my chest. I had a heart halter monitor on. Like, I was dying. And, you know, I had faith that he could heal me. I had faith that he could restore me, you know, but it started with these really minute baby steps to get me to a place of confidence that I could kind of stay away from it and just avoid it. That was kind of the strategy early on. But ultimately, I ended up meeting my wife during this period of time, and we spent a few years dating. And then when we got married, you know, it was like she got married to the really happy side of me, you know, the very Christian normie side of me. But that other side of me was just on the other edge of that fence. And, you know, soon into our marriage, people came back into our life to try to bring me back into these operations. And the husband that she married disappeared, and a very different man showed up in the middle of our marriage who was obsessed with body armor and firearms and prepping and hunting down and assassinating people. And it was like waking up next to a stranger, all
Oh,
my
yeah.
friends group. I mean, I cut off everybody. And so she went through this unbelievable challenge early on. And how do you navigate a marriage when the person goes by a different name now and is a completely different
Yeah.
person, And so our
Was that
early
one of
years,
your altars? Was it
yeah,
Jason? Is that,
yes,
yeah, I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, she had to be so confused. I mean, I guess you were to some degree too, weren't you? As the memories started to come back,
yeah. I mean,
she had to be
you
tripping
get this,
out.
like,
Like,
you start to
what?
have this bleed over. You know what I'm saying? Like you, when you go through this, it's like a more major core identity switch. And what I'm talking
Yeah.
about, for those of you that are less familiar, there's like dissociative identity disorder is what it's called in the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, or multiple personality disorders used to be what it's called. But you have major core personalities, and when you go through that trauma and that abuse, and there's that intentional splitting, you generally create a day walker side and a night walker side, and those are the one side that experiences the abuse and the other side that doesn't. This allows you to have a front face that everybody thinks is great, normal, and on the backside, a very, very different person where all of that morality has been burned off, cauterized, a seared
Yeah.
conscience, And so when that took place in the midst of my marriage, it was brutal because I started having all of these other memories now of things and experiences that beforehand used to just be nightmares to me, used to be just these horror show that happened. Like if I got drunk, this stuff would kind of come forward. But this just infected me because I couldn't get away from it. And I was terrified. I had this just dread of the night. I was fearful of water. I had all these fears that I never used to have that were suddenly there. And I didn't have a place for where these things came from. And at the same time, I also had this massive gap in my memory from the previous years, like literally getting to know my wife. I used to have to walk around and try to look at pictures and read notes about who I was, who she was, and trying to like piece together what we were, because it was like a mystery box. It just opened up in my mind. But over the course of that, at the same time, I also began to study. I was hungry for truth. I had this insane, that side of me, Nathan or Jason, this other, like it had this insatiable need to study and to learn and to research and to find answers. And at the end of the day, that is what began to drive me out of that area of confusion, because I began to learn so many people that had been talking about DID and MPD, like Russ Dizdar, a guy who'd been doing this for 35, 40 years, started out as a chaplain. And then he had his teeth kicked in when he started going out and trying to do occult crimes recovery. And you got paramedics, firefighters, and police officers who show up to the scenes of some of these events. You don't hear about it because this is a massive orchestrated cover-up, but they deal with this stuff. They got to deal with what happens when you kick in a door for a domestic violence and you find a room that's filled with pentagrams and all these dark rituals taking place. I mean, chaplains start dealing with this stuff. And so for him, it opened his eyes to this decades ago. And he started a ministry that's called shatterthedarkness.net, one of the best resources you guys to study up. He has a tab on there that's got free training resources on there and thousands of hours of training on whether it's satanic crime, occult crimes investigations, to Satanism 101, to healing from, like he has a section on freedom encounters for healing with DID and theocentric counseling and spiritual warfare and like just incredible stuff. And so I began to really dive in because I saw these men that were bold and courageous. I saw these warriors on the wall that were screaming out and confronting the darkness. They weren't hiding from it. They also weren't avoiding it. And I never saw that in the Christian church. I was raised inside the Christian church. My family were like diehard Christians. My brother-in-law is like got his master's degree from a Christian seminary. Like these people are adept in that world. And at the same time, they've got this horrific evil other side, and it's very hard for people to understand that. But this is how the camouflage worked. This is why it says, do not be ignorant of the schemes of the devil. That's his camouflage. As long as people stay ignorant, they can't understand it. And so I devoted myself to learning and identifying what happened here. And as that took place, I began to have this boldness, this infectious boldness come over me that I could come out, that I could get freedom from this, that if all these other survivors, all these other victims had gone through that journey and they're still out there, they're still alive, then I could have an opportunity for freedom. I could have an opportunity for peace in my life. I wanted to lay my head down and sleep in peace. Like I wanted to know that. I wanted to know that without drugs or alcohol. I wanted to know that without addictions ruling my life. And I realized that was the path. And so that's really where in the beginning of the book, I deal with that story of telling my wife, because I had to sit down and tell her the family that you married into is nothing like they appear. There is a reality of who we are and what we've been through that you need to know. And the question was whether or not she'd still love me after that.
Yeah.
And you know what? That was the
That's
moment
scary
where
for
so
you, I
much of that
bet.
turning took place.
Man. So yeah, so how did she handle it?
She loved me with authenticity.
What an
She
incredible
she
woman.
wept with me, you know? She
Oh,
wept with me, but then she had anger, like a deep rage, a deep betrayal. You know, she was
yeah.
furious. And honestly, I needed to see that because
Yeah.
I told people about abuse that had happened. It's not like I never talked about. There's a lot of it I never talked about, but I let it out at times incrementally to test people. And I would see people downplay it. I would see people blow it off and shrug it off like it's not that big deal. Like it's not that bad. You know, like get over it. I've had
So,
all kinds of reactions over the years, but
yeah.
for her to have anger, I was like, wow, she knew that what had taken place was so wicked. She knew it was absolutely diabolical, you know? And so for her to respond that way, it emboldened me to know that, you know what, she's going to stay with me. She said, I love every part of you. She like validated me, first of all, because it's terrifying to talk about this stuff. It's
Oh, yeah.
your most shameful moments amplified beyond your worst imagination. And for her to bless me rather
Yeah.
than curse me, which is what so many of my
Which is,
family did, which is
yeah, and
what
which
so
we're
many of the
used to
society.
inside the cults. It's all shame and guilt based, you know.
Yes.
What an incredible woman, man. Jeez. I mean, it's such a beautiful love story, you know, how you got to know each other and the things you talk about you guys did. And I mean, your engagement was just, you know, off the charts romantic. Now you know, did things on that what's the word of it? That no, I can't even think of the word. That the thing that you set up that she was doing with her
Oh
friend
yeah, the
and she got
scavenger
to the
hunt.
house. The scavenger hunt. I don't know why I couldn't pull that word out. Yeah, but yeah, it was just cool. And then you know, and then here you are coming into about a year later of your marriage, and all of a sudden things start coming up that, you know, just didn't make any sense. And so, man, just how long have you guys been married?
You know, we've been married like 11 years, 12 years. It's been a
That's
while,
awesome.
you know, and
That's
the
cool.
major turning point was my wife conceiving my daughter and getting pregnant with her because I had to choose whether or not I was going to pass my child into the family system, you know,
Bingo.
and choosing to fight to refuse to give my daughter
Yeah.
over to that was the big crux of the issue, you know, and I feel like that when we choose conviction, when we choose righteousness, like when we
Yeah.
choose to not give in to the sovereign's commands, like the book of Hebrews is one of my favorites, but it's got this line in there about how Moses, when his parents saw him, he was a comely, a beautiful child, special child, you know, they hid him for 3 months' time because they did not fear the sovereign's commands, the king's commands. And you know what? That's like what was breathing down my neck. My family members wanted to have their rights to her. And I was willing to do everything. If we die, it was worth it to me. I would rather die fighting for my
Yeah.
child's freedom than to give in so that I could have pleasure and comfort in this life. And I wanted that to be the legacy with which she understood who I was and how I was remembered before my Father in heaven, because we have an accountability. Every one of us has to give an account for the life that we lived. Every idle word we've ever spoken, we got to give an account for. That's a serious deal. I
Big time.
took that literally. Like I still take that literally. I have to give an account for this life that I've lived. And I want, if anything, is to take that fight that was in me, that insatiable need for justice, and to point it towards the heart of darkness and to shine a brilliant light on there and try to go behind enemy lines and snatch people from those flames, because that's what I needed. I need somebody that was standing on a stage screaming out the realities, even as dark and as horrible as it was. They never left anybody there. They shined on the truth and the freedom that was found on the other side of it. That's what we all need. Every one of us is lost in a world of confusion. We were born into a world of lies and deceit. Every area of our life we've been lied to. Every area of our homes, from the food we eat to the air we breathe and the water we drink, we've been systemically intoxicated by this other world. But you know what? There's this beauty found when you set yourself apart, when you choose, I'm not going to live that way anymore. Whatever it takes, we got to get out of this. And that's what my wife and I, we made that decision. And you know what? It was hell. It was an
I'll bet.
absolute nightmare. The first few years were insane. People trying to murder us, coming after us, destroy our reputation, destroy our friends, our jobs, everything. They destroyed so much of our life. But you know what? What we gained in the process was our soul. We gained back the free will that they had always had for so long. And you know what? It was a death of myself. It was a death of the wealth I'd always wanted, the power I always waited for, that there was going to come a day where payday was coming, baby, and it was mine. You know what? It was better to let it go. And I would rather be a poor man in peace. I'd rather sit down to a meal of herbs and vegetables in a house of peace than to eat the fatted calf in a house of strife. And I'd known a lot of fatted calves and strife. I'd eaten on with gold and silver for many meals, and it was strife, strife, strife. But I got to find the beauty. And so for 5 years, my wife and I, we traveled around full time in an RV. We moved all over the country. We got to go live on farms, and I got to learn to work by the sweat of my face so that we could eat bread. You know, that's literally what sustained us, was the vegetables and produce that were coming off of farms. And it taught me a way of living authentically. It taught my children a way of experiencing the life outside of the normal confines of a system, because I was a pariah out there. And it gave me the ability to raise them up where my wife and I were together. We were with our children, and we got the riches of time. We got the riches of experience, and we got to see miracles of protection and provision for now 7 years since we came out and started talking about this.
That's incredible. And that's the thing. This matrix that we're in is it stole everything from us that is good, you know, and we've been brainwashed to think that things that are important have zero meaning, literally zero meaning, you know, and we've forgotten who we are, which comes back to what I talked about early on, is, you know, that soul, that spiritual being that will live forever. And we're not, you know, you're not Nathan, I'm not Steve. These are just, you know, our avatars for this, while we're here on this planet. And we've just got to wake up to who we are and bring God back into our lives, because I mean, the way they put us to sleep and the things that we idolize in this world and we focus our time on it's hard for me as I'm going through this process and realizing those things and trying to, you know, spend my time on things that are more of God and of the things that are righteous, and look at other people, family members or whatever. And it's tough not to be judgmental. I know that's totally wrong, because half the things that kind of frustrate me that I see them, you know, thinking are important, whether it's a sports team or whatever, I used to be there. So it's not even fair for me to, you know, I don't want to be a hypocrite, but I guess I just got to stand in my power and lead by example, you know, and I just believe there's a positive effect that comes from that, because we can't tell people. Usually that's very ineffective, you know, and especially when they're asleep anyway. They're just not going to be responsive. There just got to be ways that, you know, you just lead by example, and hopefully plant a seed here and there, and eventually, hopefully, some of them start to sprout, you know. And I think that's why I do this, honestly. I know that it's not popular to the people that I know that are closest to me, and they think I'm the lost sheep. But, you know, I can't deny what I've learned and what I've felt, you know, and so I just can't stop doing it.
That's right. Well, that's what living a set apart life is about. You know, we have to be willing to suffer the purge of public opinion, the mockings and the trials. You know, some of us, that's how we get tested. At the end of the day, this is how you test a tool. You want to find out what it's capable of. You need to put it through some horrifically difficult things. It says Yeshua, Jesus, the Messiah, learned obedience through suffering, you know, and many of us have never really had suffering. We never suffered persecution, but it says if the world loves you, you're an enemy of mine. You know, the world should not love us. And you know what? There's a lot of the world inside most people. They may not realize it in the beginning stages of their life. They may think that they're not worldly, but the truth is, much of our life has been infected by the ideologies, the doctrines of demons. We have been led astray in so many areas of our life, and we have forsaken the truth and purchased a lie. But you know, it says we're supposed to buy the truth and not sell it. And when we do that, what we begin to get is treasure that's truly incorruptible, a treasure that will never be lost, because it's storing up good works, the things you're supposed to be doing. As you're doing this, you're laying up a generation. Those that are younger than you can look at your legacy, and they can understand that you made a distinct change at that time in your life, that the old man died. Like you said, the old man disappeared. And you know what? That's a good thing for a lot of us because there's better fruit on the other end of that. In order for a seed to germinate and come to life, it has to die in the ground. And you know what? Then it can bear much fruit. But until that time, it's doing nothing. And many people are sitting on the shelves of solitude, not doing anything effective in the kingdom, not doing anything effective in life at all. They're not contending, they're not fighting. They've been pulled away into a spiritual, technological slumber. And you know what? That place of idleness, that place of boredom is exactly where the adversary keeps those of us that should be his greatest enemies. That's where he keeps them in the trenches. He keeps them from ever sticking their head over the enemy line and coming in and being a nuisance or a threat. But many of you that are waking up today, you've been entrusted with great gift of information, a gift of truth that so few generations had. So many of us can go learn about almost anything we want to right now, and we should not squander that. We will be held accountable for all of the information that we've had. And you know what? Those that are closest to you often cannot hear this from you, just like you're experiencing right now. But you know what? I pray all the time that the Father would bring people into their lives that they can receive it from, because that's at the end of the day, sometimes it's all it took. All it takes sometimes is one person on the outside of the whole thing who brings it up and they're like, whoa, that's what they need. They need that paradigm shift. And you know what? So many folks are out there right now. They're looking for information. They're hungry for the truth and they're going to seek it out. And we pray all the time that the Father gives that answers to those that seek him. He said, if you diligently seek me with all your heart, you will find me, and that's a truth. That's an absolute reality. So I'm thankful that you've set yourself on a different course of life. And I know it will bear good fruit, even though you're experiencing a lot of the hardship side of it too.
Well, it's interesting too, because as I mentioned to you earlier, I kind of woke up to I guess the false truth claims that I had been taught. I believe that the internet made it so those couldn't be hidden so easily. And so I'm very grateful to be where I'm at, even though it is challenging. But as I woke up to the darker stuff, that was more difficult. But you don't know this about me, and people that listen to my podcast, I think I've talked about it a couple of times, but we got another podcast that I just stopped so I could focus on this one just a month ago and it's called Life After Addiction Indictment. And I was addicted to opiates for 14 years. After coming off my Mormon mission 3 months in, because I'd wake up with these gut aches that just were killing me. And, I went out soaking wet at like $1.54. And 3 months later, my dad ended up flying out to my mission. And I was like 123 pounds, jaundiced looking. I come home and 3 nights later, I'm in the ER having what they thought was an appendectomy, which I did. They did take out my appendix, but that's when I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease. I had 16 inches of my small bowel cut out. And because of that, that's what started me on my path of, I call it dancing with the devil for 14 years. And I don't wish that on an enemy, man. That was freaking hell. And then not because of my addiction, had nothing to do with why I found myself going to federal prison over a big mortgage fraud case that my appraisal firm, did appraisals in. And so I got thrown into that. And so, it's crazy because I tell people that, there was things I did in my addiction definitely that would have sent me to prison that I never got caught for. The thing that sent me to prison, I had nothing that I intentionally did to commit, be involved in some mortgage fraud scheme, but I know that was where I had to go. I had to go through that, even though it was totally wrong, and unjust, but I needed that. I needed that perspective, because I was so caught up in the world, man. Everything was about money and stuff and my businesses, and that's what I thought defined me, But man, when you get that stripped away and you lose your freedom, it doesn't take but a few minutes to really know what matters and what your core values are, and just that family's everything, that and your relationship with Jesus Christ. That's what it comes down to for me. And I still fight, the crap every day of wanting the comfortable life and things. I'm not going to lie, but I pray every day that I'll just stay grounded, and I'll do the will that I'm supposed to do. And that's, meeting people like you and having you on here. I mean, it does more for me than probably anybody listening, because I don't know. I just feel like this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And I ignored it for a long time, and it just kept coming at me and bugging me. And so I just thought, you know what? I'm just going to put my other podcast on hold for now and just focus on this because we're at a time in the world where we just need to be doing everything we can to try to help other people. And I think we're going to get to a point where they're going to be reaching out to us, needing help, because if we're going where I think we're going and what's going to come, it's going to rock people's world, you know. But anyway, I just don't know why I went off on that tangent, but it's, we have to go through tough times. I would never compare what I went through compared to what you've been through, but that's the refiner's fire.
Yeah.
That's what trial's about. We have to choose whether we're going to let ourselves be victims or if we're going to pick ourselves up and try to find the light through the darkness that we go through. It's not always easy. And I sucked for 8 years when I got out of prison mentally. And, I was in a victim stance for quite a while, and just, no one's coming to save you. You've got to save yourself. And yeah, it's just, what you've done is truly, it's inspiring as heck. And I just really appreciate you sharing what you've shared. And I'd love to have you come back, if you'd be open to that. And because there's so much that you have been through and wisdom that you've got that I think can just help so many people, and there's so many people, like you said, that are in that situation still to this day. And it's like, as an addict, I didn't know the way out. This was I got sober in 1990. And there's days I'd drive to work because it wasn't, addiction was looked at so differently, 33 years ago. And same with coming off a mission for that matter, and, I'd drive to work some days just crying because like I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired, but I didn't know how to get out, and, you know, being in a situation where people are stuck in the situation they're dealing with and the horrific things they're dealing with and not knowing. But if they can just hear a story from somebody that has been through it like you and see that it is possible. I remember getting letters, from, say, my father-in-law, for example, when I'm in prison, and just saying, reference a few scriptures here and there. And, the simple saying of this too shall pass, when you're in it, it doesn't ever feel like that's true, but I'm 13 years past, decade plus, half, whatever it is, past. And I think you provide a lot of hope for people. And, one thing I learned when I was in prison too is I got a letter from a lady who knew my mother. I never knew her. Didn't meet her till about 7 years after I got home. And she just constantly sent me letters. But the first one said, I don't know what it's like to be in there, and I will never try to pretend that I do. But if you can think of 3 things every day at night when you go to bed to be grateful for that day, I think it will help you.
Mm.
And this was about 2 months in, and I was really depressed. It was the first time in my life that I wasn't able to control anything, and my family's out there basically struggling, and now I can't do anything to help. And, when you get out of self and focus on other things, especially gratitude, it was a game changer. That shifted everything. And so if you're listening, and think life is horrible and there's no hope, just let Nathan, hopefully a little of my story, help you know that this too can pass, and that, you should have hope, because there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help too.
Right. You're Thank you for sharing your testimony too. It says the enemy, the dragon, that devil of old, is defeated by the blood of the Lamb, the words of our testimony, and not loving our lives when faced with death. It's the most powerful things that we have is to share those testimonies with others. And
So true.
some of you may not think you have a very powerful testimony or a very important one. But let me assure you of this. Every one of them is needed. There are people that can relate to, nobody else on this world can relate to them like you can. That we have
so
literally
true.
every experience that you have gone through in your life, you think may have been wasted or worthless or doesn't really have any meaning. He redeems all of it. He redeems all of it. There was moments of time in my life where I never wanted to have to think about that moment again. And yet I've got to see some of those very moments become the crucible with which my future was formed. And it wasn't for evil. It wasn't for bad. You know what? I've seen him redeem it for great good. That's literally what everything that Joseph, he finally had all the power in the world to crush his brothers, and he said, everything that
Yeah.
you intended for evil, Yahweh intended for good and the saving of many lives. And I sincerely believe that's what can happen. That's the transformative power that can happen in walking in a relationship with him, in becoming a new man, becoming a new woman, so that, you know what, you may be very unrecognizable to the people that used to know you
Yeah.
13 years ago. You're probably a very stark difference to that man. But you know what? That's progress. That's better. I would rather be there. And I'm firmly convinced that the root of all addictions is a need to be loved. There's a need to be
100%.
loved. And you know
Yep.
what? There's a reason so many people are crawling into the bottles or climbing into the cupboards and looking for something to knock them out and make them feel different. They are needing love. But with love, you need the other edge of that, which is truth. You must
Yep.
be willing to give that to people transparently and honestly in a powerful and profound way. And by doing so, we can truly inoculate the world to the greatest enemy that we all battle, which is fear. And you know what? Truth is far more contagious than fear ever will be, because it's immutable, it's indefeatable, and we all need to walk our lives out in authenticity.
Bingo. That's so true. Yep. And, and that's why, as we both talked before we got started, I said I'm an open book. You said the same thing. And, I remember when I would talk about some of this stuff as it was happening, because I didn't have anything to hide. I knew the truth, some of the things I did during my addiction, sure, I was embarrassed by or ashamed of, um, but as I was going through the process of, being indicted and all that, as you speak those things and share from truly from your heart and soul, that's that authenticity that I believe that people are starving for, because there's just so many facades out there through social media and everything that, we do need truth. We do need authenticity, and we just can't be afraid to share it.
Right.
Well, man, Nathan, I really appreciate your time. Do you have any final words you want to leave with the audience, along with where they can, connect with you?
I do. We've shared for many years now. Like, I published the book, which is fantastic. I am so grateful that I did that. But along the way, we also got to find some of the greatest treasures on our journey. And, so we talk a lot about all kinds of things on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/Nathan Reynolds. We've got over 500 videos that chronicled our journey on the road, but it also many of the things that he gave us along the way. And one of those was fresh milled flour and grinding our own grain and making bread. And it helped to transform our health and our bodies in such a powerful and profound way. So there's we didn't talk about all this stuff all the time. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
there's a lot of other things that I'm also very, very passionate about in regenerative
Well, that's why I want to have
agriculture.
you
And,
back. So there's a lot of stuff that you can
yeah,
share and that'll really help
because
educate people.
because you got to go through the suck, but you got to go
It's
through
so
the
true.
crap. It's true. You got to deal with that stuff. But you know what? On the other side of it, there's provisions and promises of plenty in totally unique ways that you would have never expected. And we have been entrusted with an incredible life now over these years. My wife gave birth to twin babies in a miraculous way, unassisted, in an
Wow.
Airbnb. We've had a wild journey just in the past year alone,
So do you
that
have
I am just
3 kids that you
delighted to.
have?
So I have 4 children now.
4. Okay.
Yes. Yep.
Dude,
And you know what?
that's so
It has
awesome.
been an incredible, incredible wild ride that I never thought I could have had. And I am so thankful, because there is out of death, there truly can come life. And that is only from the author of life. So thank you so much for having me on. Those of you that are wanting to reach out to me, you can contact me at snatchedfromtheflames@protonmail.com. And also there you can get my book, Snatched from the Flames. I have it on audiobook. I did a narration of it, an ebook as well.
Right here.
There's the book. There you go. You can
All
get
the
it
links in the show notes for all
right
this
on.
information as well.
Absolutely. I'm also on Rumble at the Linen Railroad, and let's see, and TikTok at Snatched from the Flames. So I really appreciate it, Steve. This is a fantastic time to get to talk with you. Thank you.
Hey, it's been my pleasure. Thanks so much for your time, and Merry Christmas, and look forward to talking to you again soon.
Likewise.
Take care.
Hello, I'm Mike Lindell, and I'm here to tell you about my new product from MyPillow. Towels that actually work. Watch this absorbency test. Here's another towel that we randomly went out and bought. Here's one of my towels with the nice design. I don't know if you can see this, but you could line a swimming pool with this. This is crazy. Get rid of it. Towels that actually work.
The new MyPillow towels are exclusively made with 100% USA combed cotton with proprietary technology and with maximum absorbency. They dry you faster and are guaranteed to work.
I'm interrupting this commercial right now. Retailers have canceled MyPillow. And to thank you for all your support, I'm going to pass the savings directly on to you. Go to MyPillow.com to get deep discounts on all MyPillow products. For example, you get my dog beds for as low as $19.99. Or for a limited time, you can get my 6-piece towel sets, regularly $109.99, now only $39.99. The lowest price ever with your promo code.